7.
Matthew 7.
Matthew 7,
Okay.
24 to 30.
Thank y'all. See, y'all need to be posting in Group Me what we're supposed to be doing the next week. With everything going on, I just went to the next section in our book. Matthew 7. Oh,
I wrote it down.
it's all right. Are you sure it's Matthew 7?
Yes.
For the Syrophoenician woman?
That's what you said. We were going to go back a little bit. Mark
Right,
7 chapters.
Matthew 7 is part of the Sermon on the Mount. So hang on just a second. Let's just look it up.
The Gentile mother's faith.
Yeah, where is that?
Matthew 7, verse 24 to 30.
Verse what?
24 to 7.
24 to 30.
There's not even 30 verses in Matthew 7, though.
Yeah, there is.
She's looking right at it.
I'm looking at it. It's the same chapter we were in last week.
No, it goes to 29.
I don't know if it goes to 29.
I mean, maybe it's a different.
Mark.
Now, Mark makes sense, but
Wow.
She put
All right.
down wrong.
No, I mean,
it's all right. I mean, I'm
My
the one that goofed up. So
my eyes
on
are
you,
I'm
Miss
having issues with my eyes.
it's all right. Yes. So verses 24 through 30. All right. Of Mark chapter 7. So for those of you watching, hello Amanda. For those of you watching on the internet in the future after we do this, Mark chapter 7, verses 24 through 30. Let's get us some context here, back up just a tiny bit. Where is Christ when this happens? He's up near Tyre and Sidon, right? He's up in the northwestern corner of the Holy Land, for lack of a better way of putting it. And in 2 weeks, we will actually be talking specifically about Tyre and Sidon out of your textbook. But it was a very gentilic is how we would say that. A very gentilic area, Hellenistic area. Any of the Jews that were up in that region were very influenced by Greek and Roman culture. They might still abstain from things like bacon and shrimp, but as far as devotion and faith on a daily basis, probably not real devout region. And we've talked before about how Jesus spent a lot of his ministry in areas like that where polytheism was an acceptable thing, where any number of religious ideas were tolerated, because in Judah itself, that region of Jerusalem, the militant religionists, I think that's how I want to say that. The militant religionists were there, and Christ coming to speak the good news of a new covenant coming into play ran in, very much against their presuppositions about what the old covenant was. And so for his own longevity, he stayed away from that region very often. And he went to the Jerusalem area pretty much just to fulfill prophecies out of the Old Testament and to antagonize the religious leaders just enough to keep the spiritual battle alive and well, so that he would eventually be crucified on the right day.
He was just poking the fire.
Yep.
To keep it
Yeah.
smoldering.
That's right. A little bit of a bellows blow, just so let's flame this up just a tiny bit. Let's use the cattle prod on the goat. So he's up here in the Tyre and Sidon area. So verse 24. He got up and departed from there to the region of Tyre and Sidon. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, but he could not escape notice. Instead, immediately after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit came and fell at his feet. Now the woman was Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, And she kept asking him to drive the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Allow the children to be satisfied first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she replied to him, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "Because of this reply, you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter." When she went back to her home, she found her child lying on the bed, and the demon was gone. All right, so this passage has been twisted and abused throughout history about how Jesus was such a racist because he called this Gentile woman and her child a dog.
I was going to say, can you maybe interpret?
Yeah, that's the whole
super
point of why I said we're going to cover this today. Yeah, because there's a few different words in the Greek language that we translate into English as dogs. Go ahead, Don.
Can I say one of them?
You have at it.
Well, actually, when they say that he's talking about a dog, is because in history, the Jewish people and the Greeks, they was not on the same level as spiritually, something like that. But they look at them as unclean. That's exactly what they're saying.
You're saying the Jews
The Jews look at the Greeks as unclean, that they are not to be around. See, back then, a Jewish person would not let a Gentile into their home. Period. It was illegal. It was actually against the law for them to.
It was against the Pharisee doctrines.
Yeah,
yes.
for them to come into each other's homes, because they was considered unclean. So that's what Jesus was saying is, you are unclean, woman. You need to, stay back. But that doesn't mean that I read something this week, and I always really thought that salvation at that point was only for the Jewish people, because Jewish was the chosen people of God. But I found out that that's not the case. It was Jesus had Gentiles that was also being saved at that point, but his primary goal was for the Jewish people, and only the Jewish people. But Gentiles had the right to come in and be added on to.
So good response. So when Jesus talks to her, he uses the word that everybody that spoke Greek, at least the way Mark records it, he uses the word for dog that meant dog, but with the connotation of a wild dog that lived out in the dumps, was definitely unclean. It was not a pet. It was a feral, we would call it a feral dog. And it was pretty much a carrion animal. It just ate stuff that was already dead and rotting, right? So we might think of like a hyena or a coyote, something like that. Yes, scavenger. And he uses that word, and when he's talking about the children here, as Donald was just talking there, the Jewish people as a whole, and we've talked about this a lot through the last few years, the Jewish people as a whole thought that they were the only ones that could be saved, not buying into the idea that they were supposed to be the light to the Gentiles of a relationship with Yahweh. They never fulfilled that role that they were commanded to be in the Old Testament. And so Jesus kind of just...
the reason Jesus had to come and save the world.
That's right. That's exactly, that is
not
absolutely
just
right. And so Jesus uses this word because that is the word that everyone around a Jewish rabbi would expect him to use of Gentiles. Jesus condescends himself in this point to speak the way people expect him to. Jewish rabbis would refer to Gentile people as that scavenger, unclean dog very regularly. All right? So Jesus is not saying anything shocking when he says this. He gives a very... Have y'all ever been engaged in a conversation with a total stranger where it almost feels like the conversation is running off of an expected cultural script? Like, how you doing? Doing all right. You know, you're sitting next to somebody in the airport. How you doing? I'm all right. Crazy weather we're having, huh? Right?
How about them hogs?
Correct. I mean, we have these cultural mores, they're called, just kind of standard expectations of how we do things, especially related to strangers, that just kind of, it keeps the peace, it lets us pretend to be nice people, but we don't actually give a flibberty gibbet about the person, the stranger that we're talking to. But we have these niceties that we go through. So Jesus, as a Jewish rabbi, who incidentally, his doctrine that he taught was very much in line with the Pharisees. Very much in line. He was far more a Pharisaic rabbi than he was a Sadducee rabbi. Because Jesus talked about the resurrection. He talked about angels. He did miracles. The Sadducees denied all of that. The Sadducees denied an afterlife at all. Right? But the Pharisees, they were very much modern day dispensationalists. Like the end times dominated all their theology. And so he's doing a standard response that is expected in that culture. When a Gentile comes to a Jewish rabbi, to simply give a blanket statement that refers to Gentilic people as unclean and a little bit less than. But again, it's not shocking. It's not like he's punching her in the face. He's giving a standard expected answer. Kind of
Probably
like
one that she expected by walking
absolutely,
into this situation.
absolutely. Just like if you have ever heard somebody tell a Polak joke around Polish descent people, because they know that the Polish descent people kind of expect folks to poke fun about Polacks, right? Now, and keep in mind, especially you on the video, I recognize that's very politically incorrect. All right, so.
I could have said Aggies, but that's okay.
Well, we could crack Aggie jokes as
That's what I
Razorback.
popped out and then she
Yeah,
she-
absolutely. We could talk about them Yankees, since we're south of the Mason-Dixon. But we have all these tropes that we use. Y'all are making the point here. We have these tropes that we use that don't shock anyone. We have lawyer jokes about how they're sharks or they're snakes or they're whatever, right?
Yeah. So the word redneck.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
cutting off anybody
My
that
favorite
lives
joke about the etymology of the word politics: poly means many and ticks are blood-sucking creatures, I mean, just those
Yeah, you
sorts.
can say that out loud and everybody just kind of laughs.
Right. Even when I said it to Bruce Westerman himself.
He
Right? I mean, he thought it was hilarious because he doesn't see himself as a politician. He's a forester. That's his actual mindset. So anyway, that's what's going on here with Christ. So he uses this word and refers to them as unclean, outside of civilization creatures. Her response is where it actually gets interesting. And that's what all the folks that call Jesus a racist for saying this, they completely miss the point of this story. Her response to him shows amazing grace. Because when she responds to him, notice what she says. Where is it? At verse 28, she says, Lord, then of course in English we can only translate it dogs, but she says, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. She uses a completely different word for dog that only referred to domesticated pets. Things that had once been on the outside but brought into the family. So she takes the, at just a glance, an insulting word. She keeps the same overall, or the same fundamental meaning of a canine, But she throws out all the implications of uncleanness, the implications of outside the camp, the implications of undesirable. She still refers to herself as being a canine. Sure, I'll take that. But I'm not a hyena. I'm a Labrador retriever. Kind of a thing.
So what she's saying is that even, I may have started here, but being that I'm here in front of you, I'm choosing to be, I choose.
I am just asking for a crumb from the kids' table. That's right. Because, and what she's doing there, and I honestly, I have a lot of faith in Jesus' understanding of how people operate. And I have a hunch he probably knew what she was afraid of. And so what he did was he used a cultural trope to invite her to identify for all the other people around them where her heart actually was. He opened a door for her to use her wit, to use her creativity, to express her faith and say, yeah, I was once out there, but I believe in you. I am inside the household of faith.
Or I'm asking you.
She's saying she is inside the household of faith. She's now asking Christ to give a crumb.
That's what I'm saying.
But for her to use this particular
humility instead
for
of
that's right, because she's not saying that I'm a child sitting at the table. She says, yeah, I'm a canine and I was once unclean, and you're right. But I'm now inside the house, and I'm so close inside the house that I'm under the table that the children sit out, and I'm simply asking you for a crumb as the master of the house. Please heal my daughter of this demonic problem. And so what does Christ do?
He grants it.
He absolutely affirms her faith in front of all the witnesses. We don't have a clue. Was it just the 12 that were watching this? Was it 75 people? We don't have a delineation of a crowd size here. We do know it was inside a household though, right? It was like he went into this
Which
house.
means that it was probably the 12 and at least the family members
Right.
and the servants inside that house.
That's right. So we've got a small crowd at the minimum that watched this woman come in, go through the standard cultural interchange that everyone expects a rabbi to do with a Gentile female, because you got to add that layer to this social interaction that's going on here. But this rabbi takes a situation, opens the door for this woman to not only show her wit, her wisdom, but also her faith. She does all three in that one simple little exchange. She doesn't argue with this rabbi. She knows what he can do because she knows who he is. And she believes who he is.
And I would think that, in every other passage that we've ever seen, that, touching the hem of his cloak is enough. So you have to think that this, if you look at that any other way, it would almost desensitize or eradicate the purpose of the faith, like the healing by faith from all of the other people that he touched. He didn't just heal Jewish people throughout in all of these situations. It was faith. It was people that believed. And I think he knew that the moment that he had to know the moment that she walked in the door, that she was putting herself in a situation that when she's entering the home, that's doesn't happen, right?
Right.
She knows that she can be subjugated to being tossed out on her face. Plus she's a woman, technically. Without a man, she could have been stoned in the, there's I'm just saying, there's a lot of different things
She
for
could
culture.
certainly have been ostracized.
Absolutely.
Even in a Hellenistic city, she could have been ostracized.
So, that just shows that, he knew that just with her showing up and asking him the question she asked, that she already believed that he could do it.
That's right.
But he used it as a teaching moment.
That's right. Because what's the fundamental lesson here? Not only can Jesus do a miracle from a distance, and we've already seen him drive demons out of Legion the guy that identified himself as Legion and kill a herd of pigs. But he was in the presence of that, right? He's in the presence of demons that he drives out most of the vignettes that we see in the Gospels where he's doing that. Here he makes a demon leave and never even sees the kid. And he's got the power to make this unclean spirit leave its host from a distance. That's pretty powerful.
And it wouldn't have been in the same city, right?
It probably was, actually. A Syrophoenician woman being in Tyre, that is the region known as Syrophoenicia.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah, I just need to leave it. But, Phoenicia is there on that north. If you're consider the Mediterranean Sea as your center point for your map in your mind, Phoenicia was right on, let me turn so I can see it in my head, the northwestern corner, if you will, of the Mediterranean Sea, and Tyre's right at the southern tip of Phoenicia. Right, and Syrophoenician is talking about she's a blend of Syrian and Phoenician is what she is, and Syria is just to the east. No, yeah, it's the northeastern corner. What am I talking about? The northeastern corner of the Mediterranean Sea, and then Syria is just to the east.
So were the cities like divided? This is gonna sound kind of funny, but I've been to New York City, and if you know how New York City divides its people, like you have like
The different boroughs.
all the different boroughs. But even within a borough, you will have like an entire quadrant of a borough, like in Brooklyn, for example. Like you have an entire 3 streets that's like considered a quadrant. It's a quad, or if I guess it's 4 streets, and it is all Jewish people. It is only Jewish people. Nobody else moves into that neighborhood, or
Right.
they'd be ran out of that neighborhood.
Right.
Right? Like Russians don't move into the Jewish quadrant. Like they
Unless
are
they're
over,
Russian Jews.
well, yeah.
But yes, you're right.
But they don't.
You don't have Eastern Orthodox Russians moving into a Jewish
Absolutely
quadrant. Right.
Right, and so like the boroughs are. So I'm like wondering, like, were cities like back then divided that way?
Certainly.
In
Humans have
different markets, different.
We have absolutely.
Segregation. That's the word I was looking for.
We've absolutely segregated our own selves since time out.
So I just wondered if that, like, if we were to go back in time and see something like that, that's how it would be. They would have their own market and their own education place and their own.
Tyre, we're talking about Tyre here, right? Tyre was mostly Gentilic, right? But they had a very strong Jewish presence there, and faithful Jewish presence. But we know from archaeological finds at ancient Tyre that Jewish, we'll use the word quadrant since that's what we use today, that section inside of Tyre that was Jewish population, they had a synagogue, they had industry in their area that very much related not only to general culture, but also to Jewish specific needs, right? Things that would deal with their clothing requirements. Like Jews had different types, that even the materials that made up their clothing were different than what Gentiles could use, right? Gentiles could use any kind of clothing they wanted, Jews couldn't, right? And on top of that, y'all have heard this said many, many times throughout your lives before any of you even met me, there's no pig bones in any of the garbage dumps inside the Jewish quadrant that have been excavated, because Jews don't eat pigs. But the Gentiles ate a lot of pork. A whole lot of pork. That's why it's so easy to classify, oh, this must have been a Hebrew or Jewish community because there ain't no pig bones here. But everywhere else there were lots.
Is it fair to say now that since that woman accepted, Jesus called all the people back then dogs, the Greek people.
Yeah, I mean, in that statement there, he basically said every Gentile is unclean.
Yeah. So it is fair to say now that once a person receives Christ, if you're even a Gentile or alien or whatever speech,
Yeah.
that you become no longer a dog, but a child of God.
Correct.
You know,
Or are we still the dog under the table?
I think we're.
I don't think so. She's doing a wonderful play on words without knowing the full gospel.
Yeah, mine
Right.
too.
The idea of adoption into the family Jesus has not died yet, right, when this is happening. So the power of the death of Christ and the resurrection of Christ and the ascension of Christ, none of that is known to anybody yet except Jesus. Right? I mean,
So it wasn't probably until that point that we became children.
we were not adopted as children into the family of God until that work of death, burial, resurrection,
Right.
and ascension. Right? But I mean, even Abraham, until Christ died and descended to the place of the dead, Abraham is not in heaven. Right? He was in paradise. He was in a separate section of the place of the dead from the place of torment. But Abraham, the father of the faith, wasn't even in the presence of God yet. Until the work of Christ on the cross and the days following. And so this woman does a fantastic job, though, of saying from what she could possibly have known about the way God operates is, I was once unclean, but I believe, so I've been adopted into the family as a pet.
So that
Which
far
is as
back,
close
when
as
you're
she
talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they wouldn't have been Jewish?
Absolutely not Jewish.
Right.
I mean,
Even though he's the father of the faith, it hadn't
King
started.
David himself would not be considered Jewish.
Right.
If we're going to get super technical, Jewishness
Started.
was a label placed upon the Hebrew people by the Greeks and then the Romans when they
Okay.
referred to them by the region from which they came, which was Judea.
Okay.
Right? The Jewish region, Judea or Judah. That's where that term comes from. If we want to talk about actual biological stuff, though, they would be Hebrews.
Or Israelites.
You could say Israelites. I mean, they were called that. But Israelite is more, it's a more appropriate word because it doesn't designate biological identity at all. Because when God brought the Hebrew people out of Egypt, a mixed multitude of non-Hebrew people came out of Egypt with them,
And they
who
all
were
became
united
Israelites.
underneath the banner of Yahweh, and Yahweh enfolded all those ethnicities and racial groups into the banner of Israelite,
And that
the
is where it
nation of
started?
Israel.
That's where it started?
Israel, yes, Israel started when God told them that they were going to be identified as the name he gave to their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Jacob, who he changed the name to Israel, which means man of God or person of God.
But see, it's also clear from the Bible that that once a Greek person, you and I, we accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior, we no longer are considered. We're considered Hebrews in the sense that we are in the family of God.
We're considered Israelites.
Israelites. That's what I'm saying. Israelites.
We are the new Israel.
We're the new Israelite. That's what I meant. That new Israelite. We have been completed into the family of God, so we're no longer considered unclean or.
So it's more important to use the term Israelite than it is Jew or Pharisee or
A
Sadducee.
spiritual.
That was more of like a racial, religious segregation than it would have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's
A
all
spiritual
about,
Jew,
remember, it's
basically.
always about context,
Right.
right? So if I'm a Roman centurion referring to those dang Jews,
Right.
I may be referring to them out of a frustration of the constant rebellion that came out of that region. But when I'm talking about the Jews, I'm talking about people that live in the region of Judah who have a religious conviction that keep rebelling against my emperor,
Okay.
right? But if I am, say, a Hasmonean who is my dynasty has been overthrown, and I'm referring to the Jews, I may just be talking about the Sadducees and Pharisees who led the political coup to usurp the authority of the kingship from the Hasmonean dynasty, right? So you've got to really make sure that you're paying attention to the historical and conversational context that that term is being used. Y'all, we're out of time. This has been a great conversation, and I'm sorry